Hey everyone, thank you for checking out A1 Math. And today we're talking about trigonometry, and I'm going to show you how to work a few different types of trigonometry problems. The first thing I want to do is go over the steps. The steps for labeling the right triangle is find the hypotenuse, find the angle, find the opposite side, then find the adjacent side. This is adjacent. Okay. Um, so you need to know how to do that in order to solve all your trig problems. You also want to know the steps for solving a right triangle. Those steps are labeled triangle, pick the correct trig function, decide to divide or multiply. And this means if your x is divided by the number, you multiply. But if your number is divided by your x, you divide. You also want to skip this step when you're looking for the angle. And then step 4, enter it into the calculator. And also, you'll want to know your trig ratios. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. And some people may know uh, the memory trick SOHCAHTOA in order to remember those. Okay, so let's take a look at some problems and show those steps in action. Okay, so in this one, we need to find the trig ratio. The first thing I want to do is label the triangle, and I'm going to show that step by step. Okay, first I label the hypotenuse, which is across from the right angle. Next, I label the indicated angle. Since it's tangent to C, this is your indicated angle. Next, I find the opposite side, which is away from that indicated angle, and opposite leg. And then find the adjacent side, which is close to that angle. Now, this is where knowing your trig ratios come in handy. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So since it's opposite over adjacent, I'm going to put tangent of 28 over 21. And in my last step, I'm going ahead and reduce that, and my final answer will be 4 over 3. Okay, let's take a look at a different problem. Okay, on this problem, this is one of the ones where you're looking for the angle. In order to find the angle, you need to go through the steps for solving a right triangle, but skip number 3. Okay, so the first step is to label the triangle with the hypotenuse, angle, opposite, adjacent. Step 2 is to pick the correct trig function. Notice how I have a two of my sides of my triangle labeled or have numbers by them, and one side doesn't. Okay, so the adjacent and the hypotenuse is what I want to use to pick the correct trig function. And that trig function for adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. So I'm going to say cosine of the angle, which in this case we don't know, is equal to 4 over 15. Okay. And again, skip step 3 here and go to step 4, which is entering in the calculator. Since we're looking for the angle on this one, we want to go ahead and hit second on our graphing calculator and do the inverse operation of the cosine function. So I'm going to hit second cosine and then type 4 divided by 15, and that's going to equal 75. Right, now I'm going to show you some more common trig problems where you have the angle, but you're looking for the side. Okay, so in number 3 here, we have the angle, but we're looking for this side. So we're just going to follow the steps for solving a right triangle. We're going to label the triangle, hypotenuse, angle, opposite, adjacent. Next, we're going to pick the correct trig function. Since I have the opposite and adjacent, I'm going to use tangent. And it's always tangent of the angle, 46. And make sure you put opposite over adjacent, and meaning putting x over your 17 here. Step 3, pick the correct, I'm sorry, decide to divide or multiply. Well, with my x divided by the number, what I'm going to do is multiply on this one. Okay, and step 4, enter it into the calculator. So whatever number's in my fraction, whether it be in the numerator or the denominator, you take that number, you type it in your calculator first, depending on what kind of calculator you have. And then you'll multiply times the tangent of 46. And hit enter, and you'll get 17.6 if you round to the nearest 10. Okay. Now, on some other problems where you are dividing, you'll put division, you'll divide right there instead of multiplying. We'll take a look at some of those. Okay. Next problem here. Okay, we'll go through our steps again. You label the triangle, the hypotenuse, angle, opposite, adjacent. Step 2, pick the correct trig function. With the hypotenuse and the adjacent, we're going to use cosine. So always cosine, sine, cosine, tangent of the angle. In this case, it's 55. It's equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. So that's going to be 12 over x. Step 3, decide to divide or multiply. Now in this case, we have the x in the denominator, so we're going to divide. Okay. Step 4, you're going to enter into the calculator. We'll have 12 divided by cosine of 55, and then you hit enter, and you get 20.9, round to the nearest 10. All right, let's take a look at one more example similar to this. Okay, number 5. So on number 5, we're going to go through our steps. We're going to label the triangle, hypotenuse, angle, opposite, adjacent. Pick the correct trig function. Okay, this time we have opposite and hypotenuse. There's nothing over here by adjacent. So our trig function is going to be sine. Sine of 70 is equal to opposite x over hypotenuse 11. Step 3, you'll decide to multiply or divide. With your x in the numerator, we're going to multiply times. So I'll type 11 times sine of 70. And when I enter it into my calculator, I get 10.3. Okay, so all you want to do is take your time, follow your steps, and you'll be fine. Let's take a look at some multi-step problems where you go through your steps for solving a right triangle twice. All right, so on number 6 here, notice we have a really 3 triangles, but the 2 triangles that's inside the bigger triangle are both right triangles. And what we want to do is solve the x on the triangle on the right side. But in order to do that, we need to know this piece in the middle. Okay. Now to solve that, we'll just work on this triangle by itself, get that answer, and use it to solve for the triangle on the right side. So we'll go through our steps again. First thing you want to do is label the triangle. So it is very important to understand that I'm looking for this piece in the middle. So this piece, no matter what it is, I don't want to write another letter by it to get me confused. Okay, but it could be opposite or it could be adjacent. But just understand, I'm just going to put this y right here because that's the number I need to find in order to solve the triangle on the right. So I'm going to label the rest of the triangle here where I have the hypotenuse, the angle. My y is going to be opposite. and this 27 is adjacent. Okay. Step 2, I pick the correct trig function. So since I have opposite and adjacent, my trig function is going to be tangent. So I say tan of 50 is equal to y over 27. Step 3, decide to multiply or divide. So since my unknown, my y in this case, is in the numerator, I'm going to multiply. And then, now that I have the y here, what I'm going to do is go ahead and type that in my calculator. And when I do, it'll be 27 times tan of 50, and I get 32.2. So now I know my measurement in the middle here is 32.2. Now what I want to do is use this in order to solve for the x over here on this side. So it may have been adjacent over here, but or opposite over here. It could be something different over here on this side. But let's just take a look. Starting again with labeling the triangle, where I have my hypotenuse, my angle, opposite, and then adjacent here. Step 3, pick the correct trig function. Okay, so since I'm doing opposite over hypotenuse, I'm going to use sine. Sine of 27 is equal to 32.2. Step 3, decide to multiply or divide. With my x in the denominator, this time I'm going to divide. So I'm going to divide with the 32.2 divided by sine of 27. And when I do that, I get my answer, which is 70.9. So I'm saying the length of this line is 32.2, and the length of this line here is 70.9. Okay, now take a look at a couple more of these multi-step problems like this. All right, again, you want to start off by labeling the triangle, hypotenuse, angle, opposite, and this time my y is adjacent. Picking the correct trig function. So it's cosine because I have the adjacent and the hypotenuse, 9 here, and I'm looking for the adjacent. Decide whether you divide or multiply. With my y in the numerator, I'm going to multiply. And then you enter it in your calculator, and I get 4.8. So y is 4.8, and I'm going to use it to solve this triangle. So I'm going to start again. Label the triangle, hypotenuse, angle, opposite, adjacent. And you see how in this triangle it's adjacent, but on the one on the right it's the opposite. Pick the correct trig function, sine, which is 4.8 over x, sine of 24, because I have the opposite over hypotenuse. Divide, because I have my x in the denominator. And then enter it into the calculator, 11.8. All right, let's take a look at one more multi-step like this one. Okay, step 1, label the triangle. I have the hypotenuse, the angle, opposite, and adjacent. Step 2, pick the correct trig function. This case is cosine because I have adjacent and the hypotenuse. So I say cosine of 44 is equal to y over 13, adjacent over hypotenuse. Step 3, multiply or decide to multiply or divide. I'm going to multiply in this case because I have my y in the numerator. And enter it in the calculator and I get 9.4. Now I'm going to go ahead and repeat these steps. Um, and when I repeat, I'll have label the triangle, hypotenuse, opposite, adjacent, pick the correct trig function. In this case, it's going to be tangent. I don't have a hypotenuse. I'm looking for the opposite, and I have the adjacent. So I'm going to say opposite over adjacent, which is x over 9.4. Step 3, I'm going to decide to multiply because my x is in the numerator. And step 4, enter it in my calculator, and I get 15.6. So the measurement of this line here is 15.6. Okay, now these are solving the measurement of these lengths of the triangle. Uh, it could also be used in context in real world situations. So that's what I'm going to show you next. But one of the things you need to know is understanding two new vocabulary words, understanding the angles of elevation and depression. Okay. And as you may think, elevation goes up and depression goes down. But the key point you want to keep focused on is the fact that you got to start with a horizontal line. So on this one here, notice how the horizontal line is here and the line of sight goes above the horizontal line. That's elevation. And if you're starting with a horizontal line and your line of sight goes down, then that is an angle of depression. And it's focusing on the angle in between the horizontal line and the line of sight. Okay. Now let me show you how these problems are used in practice. Okay. So we have this, probably mispronounced this, Mayuko, and he's sitting up in a football stadium, and he's 30 feet high. He sees the angle of depression to the center of the field at 14 degrees, and he wants to know the horizontal distance between him and the center of the field. All right, so you want to start with a right triangle and start labeling different pieces. Okay, so here we have um, uh, Mayuko, and he's sitting up here, and it is 14 degrees here for the angle of depression. So you start horizontal, and he's looking down 14 degrees to the center of the field, and he's 30 feet up in the stadium. And since they want to know the horizontal distance, they want to know from the bottom of the stadium all the way to the center of the field is the distance they want to know. If it didn't say horizontal, it's a good chance that they want to know the distance from here to here. Now, here's the problem with this particular question. It's the fact that our angle of depression is not inside our triangle. And we need an angle inside the triangle in order to work our trig. So let me show you a particular principle dealing with um, a transversal and two parallel lines. Anytime you have a transversal and two parallel lines, the alternate interior angles, the angles on the inside of those two parallel lines, are the same when you go across the transversal. So with that being said, then this angle here, which is 14, is also 14 degrees here. Now that we know that, and we know that this angle on the inside is 14 degrees, we can go ahead and solve using our trig. So we go through our steps. We'll label the triangle, the hypotenuse, the angle, the opposite, and the adjacent. We'll pick the correct trig function. And since we're working with opposite and adjacent here, we're going to do tangent. And now we're going to say the tangent of 14 is equal to 30 over x. Step 3, decide to multiply or divide. And since it's in the denominator, we're going to divide. In step 4, enter it into the calculator. And when we do, we get 120. So from the bottom of the stadium all the way to the center of the field, is 120 feet. Okay, so that's an example with angle of depression. Let's take a look at one with angle of elevation. Okay, so the surveyor is 50 meters from the base of a cliff, and he measures the angle of elevation to the top of the cliff as 72 degrees. They want to know what is the height of the cliff. So surveyor being 50 meters from the base. So if this is your cliff going here, 50 meters will be this way. So he'll be here, and he's looking up with an angle of elevation of 72 degrees. So with the angle of elevation being 72 degrees, they want to know how high up is the cliff. Now in this case, with the angle of elevation, it's inside the triangle. There's no alternate interior angles we need to do here. And we're just going to go ahead and work our trig. We're going to go ahead and label the triangle, hypotenuse, angle, opposite, and adjacent. Pick the correct trig function. This time it's tan again with opposite over adjacent, and decide whether to multiply or divide. So the x is in the numerator, so we're going to multiply. And step 4, enter it in the calculator, and you get, since it's rounded to the nearest meter, 154 feet. Okay, so um, basically you want to use the same steps as I showed you in all these problems every time. You label, pick the correct trig function based on the information you have, and then decide to multiply, divide, and then enter it into your calculator. And that's basically it in solving most of these trig problems. And I want to thank you for checking out A1 Math, and have a nice day.